So down here at the end of my workbench, I've got this awkward spot in the wall where I've got this telepost and a stud and this little bit of space. I've been stacking my sandpaper discs in there, but of course a stack is not very convenient when you want the one at the bottom. So for today's project, I'm just building a narrow little unit in there with a bunch of shelves, and adjustable shelves would be ideal. Looks like I need something about 27 inches tall. Now this is going to be a shop project, but that's no reason to make it ugly. So I went digging through my stash and I have accumulated a whole lot of thin strips of cherry over the years from other projects. So I'm going to actually glue up a whole bunch of these thin strips into making the panels that I need. And I actually have some leftover test panels from a previous project. These I'm just going to plane down flat, thinner, because I only need 1/2 inch stock for that. I'm even going to do some butt joints in these panels because most of this is going to be cut down to make small shelves, which are probably only going to be about 4 or 5 inches long. So let's see. Well, there's going to be a lot of gluing. These are all going through the planer later, so I'm not actually that worried if they shift a bit. I may have been a little generous with the glue. With these short pieces, I'm still going to put some glue on the end grain. It certainly would not hurt. You have to make sure it doesn't tip like that when it's clamped. So on this one, I added some crossways clamps to try to make sure that these butt joints are well glued together. And the next day I got to deal with this dried glue. And after that, we're going to pass this through the planer a whole bunch of times to bring it down to thickness. I want the upright parts to be about 1/2 inch thick. The shelves, I mean, they don't even need to be 1/4 inch thick, so we'll see what we end up planing that down to. And in the end, I got a couple of nice big panels of 1/2 inch thick cherry wood. And the first thing I'm going to do is square up the ends on this panel. And now the piece is at the right dimension that it should slide in here nicely. Now I want adjustable shelves, and I think for that I'm going to cut a series of dados here. So I am not going to cut this into 2 pieces yet because it's much easier to do all the dados before you cut the board apart. And for the dados, I'm going to use my box cutting blade set, which cuts a lovely 1/4 inch wide flat topped cut. I've got the blade set for a shallow cut, and the fence is set at 5 inches. I'm going to take a series of cuts across this, about every 2 inches, I think. And I've next set my fence to 4.5 inches, and I will cut out the 2 sides and the top and bottom. I also found a thin piece of scrap oak plywood, which I cut to size to be the back of the box. Just going to assemble this with a little bit of glue and some brads. And gluing the back on will go a long way to strengthening and squaring up this unit. And here's where we are so far. And so I got a tall skinny box that my sanding discs will fit in, and now I need to make the adjustable shelves. I'm measuring how wide I want the shelves, and I'm just going to take off about 1/16 of an inch so they will slide in there nicely. And luckily I took the first piece for a test fit because I misread my tape measure. That is too small. It's supposed to reach to the ends of these notches. And so back to the table saw where I reset the stop on the crosscut sled and then totally forgot to film cutting the rest of the blocks to the correct size. So I've installed my dado blade and I'm using a sacrificial fence so the dado blade is embedded partially in this wood. And I've taken a few test cuts. Now we're ready to cut the notches on the actual shelves. And after a little sanding and other fiddling with the fit, I have way more shelves than I need, but you know, I was making a few extra in case they wrecked, but they all worked out, so that should fit right there. I can put one at the bottom, and that one can go there, and that one can go there. And, well, I'll have to do a bit of rearranging, but I should be able to get another shelf in like that. And now for some sanding and finishing. I'm using a simple seal coat of shellac. Now, I've been guilty in the past of not putting any finish at all on shop projects. You could probably argue that it's not really necessary, but I find if you just put a little bit of finish on something, even just a little bit of shellac, I mean, it helps it look a lot better, but also more importantly, I think it helps the project shed dust, so it's easier to keep the shop clean, I think. So I'm putting finish on. Now, adding furniture wax is probably a bit overboard, but I do need it to look good for the thumbnail. Now, fortunately, my studs are pretty plumb, so I can just put the shelf in right up against it. And it fits nicely like that. And just confirming, that is nice and plumb. So let's clamp that into place, and then we can get some screws into it. Now, I can't fit my regular drill in there, or even my more compact drill. I have to go with my right angle driver. Now, wait a minute. How am I going to get the screw in there? Let me think for a minute. I think I better drill at an angle. And then, oops, I need the right angle driver for also driving the screw home. And one more at the bottom. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. I mean, ridiculous amount of holding strength, but there we go. And then it's a matter of figuring out what I want to go where, so I know where I'm going to put my shelves. It's actually a little tight with this one box, which doesn't really make sense because the discs are all the same size. Well, I think that turned out great. It's great to have some more shop storage where I can organize my sandpaper so they're not just stacked up. I really like that it's cherry. I like the adjustable shelves so I can reconfigure it as I need to. I should maybe glue up more of my scrap wood into panels so I can use them on other projects. But anyways, I think that's it for now. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you had some fun or learned something, and we'll see you on the next one.